Welcome to our series, The Probabilistic Model of Providence, or PMP for short. Today, we are going to be using the whiteboard. Big thing for me. I've always wanted to use the whiteboard in one of these lectures. We're going to start with some mathematical models to describe how reality operates. But I want to clarify three things at the outset. In this version of reality, things are bounded, structured, and plural. So a bounded reality means that only things that are conceivably possible exist. So there is no completely new dialogue or story about an eighth continent. It doesn't exist because there is no eighth continent. God only created 7. Same thing for meat growing on trees or the sky being purple. Reality is structured. Everything that happens is based on what has happened before. So me standing in my apartment right now, it would be almost entirely impossible to eat dinner with a guy who's in China in 5 minutes. We're bounded, reality is structured. Things that are possible are only possible based off of what is happening now. If you were to fill up your car's gas tank, you can only go as far as that gas will take you. You can't drive across the country, and you certainly can't drive across the ocean. But in an anti-determinist manner, we are presenting the concept that reality is plural. More than one option can come from the same set of present conditions. So going on to our first model. Well, as we see from present condition A, we can end up at B1, B2, or B3. And then all of these contingencies will go on to the next set of C1 through C9 and onward. But where it gets interesting is, what if we say that God's will is E5? But we start at A and then we get to E5. What this model suggests is that there are numerous pathways, numerous contingent realities that exist in God's omniscience that would lead a human actor to accomplishing E5. You don't just get there A1, B1, C1, D1, and then E5. That's not how it works. So on to the next model. Thy will be done. Thy will be done 100% of the time. But we know that man is free. Anyone can, for any choice they make, except for matters of health or law, can choose not to make that choice. So how do we end up with a reality where God's will is always done, but man is free to choose? This is how we do it. The odds that God's will happen are equal to 1. And we have a bounded, structured, plural set of realities that all have different probabilities, but they all result in God's will being accomplished as number 1. So we can have a model like this, where one actor is 99% likely to accomplish God's will, and another actor is 1% likely. Or we can have a model like this, where each actor is 25% likely to accomplish this end. Yet, in both of these models, we see that the total probability that God's will being done is 1. And I want to make one clarity here between the creator and the created. God has perfect knowledge of every bounded, structured, plural contingency within reality. Man, the created, is limited to these probabilistic understandings because we can't guarantee anything 100%, even though the outcome is 100% certain. So now I want to talk about providential asymptotes. If you remember from high school math class, an asymptote is a line on a graph that approaches a number into infinity but never quite reaches it. So I'm going to draw two asymptotes here. We can assign a probability of 99 here and a probability of 1 here. So as you're going through your life, you are becoming more or less likely to do something to a degree at which it becomes almost certain. And we can apply examples to this. Let's take the same example, that being a job. If you end up working at this stellar accountant firm, it starts down here in elementary school, where you're really good at math. Then high school, your first accounting class. Then college, your friends in your major, professors that challenge you. Then entry-level jobs, all leading to this high certainty that you wind up where you are. Now, you could say no. You could get the job offer and say, no thanks, I don't want that. But the certainty increases asymptotically. And then we have the same thing going on over here with an asymptote that approaches 1. So let's take the same guy. You're at this job and the parking's terrible, your coworkers are mean, you're overworked, you're underpaid, and at all of these intersections, you find that the odds you stay in the job are actually providentially approaching 1 and then ultimately going to 0. Now, you could keep the job at all costs. It's your choice. It's up to you. But this is the probabilistic model as your likelihood goes down. So now we're going to talk about bifurcation points. A bifurcation point in a system is when enough of a threshold is met for something to change state. Faith, a good example of a bifurcation point, because you're going, and then you're there. With the PMP model, I want to present a similar concept to a bifurcation point, but it is more so about likelihoods. So these are events in your life that wind you down a path. As you incur an event, you'll find that that event constrains you within a range of probabilities. So if you get a college degree, for example, the odds that you become a landscaper go down. They're not impossible, but now you're excluding things from reality. And as you experience consecutive bifurcation points, you find that your outcomes become constrained because you're moving down this line through this path, and every time you pass one of these moments, it becomes increasingly likely that you will carry out that 99% certainty. But the reason there's bifurcation points is because each time you move through one of these, the stuff that's outside becomes incredibly less likely because each choice constrains your future probability of choice. And this goes consecutively until you're set on the decision you're going to make. You could talk about this in a relationship, from first date to courtship to really coming to love each other. It gets constrained going down. And if we combine this with an asymptote, I think that makes it a lot clearer. So we'll do that. So we combine this with an asymptote. This is our same providential asymptote we just discussed with the odds going to 99. If we input these bifurcation points along the way, these constrain the action of the line. So the line is moving across this trajectory that is in the pathway that the bifurcation points are driving you towards. And it's not impossible that you diverge. It just becomes more and more statistically unlikely as you go through these bifurcation points and as you approach that point of total certainty from a human perspective. Not total certainty from God's perspective. Total certainty from a human perspective. So now I want to talk about weighted choice. Assuming you have options, which we are, your options aren't equally weighted. So you can take the same decision and change the conditions of the person or the agent making the decision and find that you get a completely different result. Let's say this was a guy who had to meet with his boss, and before the meeting he was in one mood and then he was in another mood. As you can see, you still have the 3 points, the 3 options, but the likelihood has changed, so that what was most likely before the change to the initial condition is now far less likely, and you're far more likely to make a decision that before the change you were highly unlikely to take. So these nodes that imagine it's a person, so much is conditioning us before we make the choice that it changes the choice we're likely to make, but we still have the option to pick any of the 3. So now I want to talk about providential convergence between 2 agents. So this is easiest to think about if we're talking about a relationship. So if it is ordained that these 2 people get married, we'll find that beneath each person's portfolio, a list of events that happened that all had their same likelihood. So maybe 5, 10, 38, 20, 12, 80. And these events are unlikely in and of the fact that they happened, but this confluence and how this blends together would add up to an entirely likely likelihood. But it's based off the 2 agents making the decision, but that decision consecutively moving down is based on such a wide network of probabilities that this decision seems incredibly unlikely, yet it works. Ever been in a relationship, you can testify to the fact that these unlikeliest of factors can combine seemingly miraculously to create what is a highly likely outcome between 2 agents. And that is where I want to stop today. This is the PMP, the probabilistic model of providence. All these theories you saw on the board are going to become part of the lexicon of conceptual material we take to develop the theory and ultimately to apply the theory. And thank you for fulfilling my lifelong dream of being able to do a whiteboard lecture. Thank you, and God bless.